So now it is finally time to work on our forest world. So this is going to be really fun, but before we can do that, a quick word from our sponsor. Just kidding, we don't have a sponsor, but if you do want to support the channel, then you can check out the Unreal Sensei Masterclass. The Masterclass is an ever-expanding collection of tutorials for Unreal Engine. And do not worry, there are a ton of free tutorials and free assets still planned for this channel. So if you want to check out the Masterclass and support the channel, there is a link in the description below. So with all that being said, let's jump into our forest. So let's create a project completely from scratch. I just opened up Unreal Engine 5 here, and let's go to games, and let's specifically use the third person template. That's because I want our little guy within our scene to help give our scene some scale as a reference for when we are creating our little village. And then it looks like it's automatically going to save on my desktop, which is what I want. And then I'm going to name this Creek Beginner. And I'm going to uncheck starter content since we don't need that. And I think all the defaults right now are completely fine. So let's create this project. So this is what you should see when you create your project. Keep in mind that we did edit our user interface just a bit. I added in the world settings. So you can get the world settings all the way up here within Windows World Settings. And I collapsed all my panels to the right here by right-clicking and clicking on collapse. It says project files out of date. Would you like to update it now? Let's just update it. And if I press Control B to bring up my content drawer, let's organize my project just a bit. Since by default this created 4 different folders and I just want to use one folder right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my meshes from here and let's move them into third person VP. Just like that. Let's grab the mannequin and let's select both of these, hold down shift, and let's also move them into third person VP. And geometry, let's grab these meshes and move them into third person VP just like that. So now you notice that these folders are still here. Whenever I move a lot of content within Unreal Engine, you want to right click on the content folder and then click on fix up redirectors in folder. Just like that. So now that we fix up our redirectors, I'm going to go select these 3 folders and press the delete key and just delete them like that. So now we have all of our third person content within one folder and we don't need this overview, so I'm just going to delete it right now. In case you don't know what redirectors are, basically whenever you move assets around, sometimes they might leave an asset reference behind. So in order to fix that up and actually be able to delete some of my folders, you need to right click sometimes on the content browser and then click up fix up redirectors. So now that we're done organizing our content, I think it's time now to bring in some assets we're going to use to create our environment. So the assets we specifically want to use were included within the downloadable content you should have already downloaded if you've been following along with this tutorial. So it's specifically within the Intro to Unreal project. And if you haven't downloaded yet, reminder, link in the description below. So let's open this up and let's migrate some of our assets into our new project. Okay, so once you open up the downloaded project, you want to right click on the folder that's called Creek Assets, just like this. And then you want to come up to Migrate. And it'll just select all the different assets we need to bring into our new project and press OK. And then we're going to navigate to the content folder of this project. So just as a reminder, we can right click right there on the content folder and then go to Show in Explorer. Control C, so copy the location of my content folder. And now, when I'm migrating my assets, all I have to do is come up here and Control V to paste in the location of my content folder, press Enter, and now click on Select Folder. So that'll just copy all the assets from our downloaded project into our actual project, and we can see that they're right here and they're ready to go. So keep in mind, in order to follow along with this tutorial, you need to download some assets. And the specific assets we're going to download is this one right here. So we're going to download the Quixel Megascans Medieval Game Environment. So you want to come into your launcher marketplace and type in Medieval Game Environment. Exactly. This is an amazing map and a bunch of amazing Quixel assets that was created by Epic Games for us to use. So go ahead and check this out and make sure you download it. There should be a download button right there. And then you're going to want to create a project. So make sure you create the project. And keep in mind that this project was made for Unreal Engine 4. But that's no worries since we're going to update this project to Unreal Engine 5. And to update a project to Unreal Engine 5, it is very simple. All we have to do is find out where that project is. So let us launch Unreal Engine 5. Right here within the Unreal project browser, it should be there. So we're going to type in Medieval. And we can see the Medieval Game Environment is right there. and in really small letters it says 4.26. You can ignore this one since I already updated it to Unreal Engine 5 right there. But if you want to update this to Unreal Engine 5 and it was made in Unreal Engine 4, all you have to do is just double click on this and then it will ask you if we want to convert it. So you could convert this in place, or you can create a copy. So Unreal will automatically create a copy of this project and then convert it into Unreal Engine 5. That's so you don't accidentally break your project. Another way we can update this is that if I right click, and let's actually show this in Explorer. So if we manually navigate to the location of the project you downloaded, we can right click on the executable file and then click on switch Unreal versions. And then we can switch this from 4.26 to 5. And then when you switch it, you could just simply double click on the executable file and open it up. So those are two ways to update your project. So I think what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to double click on this and let's go open a copy within Unreal Engine 5. So this is what you should see when you finally download the project. As we can see, it's a nice little medieval village. And you might be wondering what all these red blocks are. So these red blocks are basically player blockers. So they prevent the player from going out of bounds, from going outside of the map. But that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and press G to just hide those and go into our game view of what our player will actually see. So I want to bring all this entire map, so all the different assets that make up this map, into my new project. So to do so, I'm going to press Control and Space to bring up my content browser, and then we're going to go to Maps, and it is specifically the Medieval Village _P. So I'm going to right click, and then we're going to Asset Actions, and Migrate. So this may take a while because Unreal Engine is right now going through and finding all the different assets that comprise of this map. And now that Unreal has found all those assets, which it is a lot, I'm going to press OK and do exactly what I did beforehand. Let us navigate to where our new project is and simply copy everything. So now it's going to be copying the files. This may take a bit. So here I am back in our original project. And as we can see, we get a bunch of new folders that we copied over from the Medieval Asset Pack. Now, before we open up the Medieval level, it's very important that we come up to Settings, Project Settings, and we need to enable some things. So the first thing we need to enable is Virtual Texture. So make sure Enable Virtual Texture Support is turned on, since some of the assets for the Medieval Pack are using virtual textures. Don't worry what virtual textures are. I do have a video that goes over it. So that video should be in the top right hand corner right now if you want to dive deeper into what virtual textures are. And then what I'm going to do is that we're going to go to Fog, and we're going to turn on Support Sky Atmosphere Affecting Height Fog. So if we don't do this, then our fog will look really weird, especially when the sun is at nighttime, especially at angles, since our fog will be emissive. By turning this on, our fog will no longer be emissive, which is exactly what I want. And now I'm just going to go ahead and let's restart now. So now that we restart our project, if I press Control and Space, we should be able to come to Maps, and then we're going to go ahead and open up our Medieval Village _P right there. So this is what you should see when you open up your project. As we notice, our scene is very laggy right here, and at the bottom right hand corner it says compiling shaders, and we get a bunch of errors. This is all fine, this is expected. What Unreal is doing right now is that it's recompiling the shaders to get it ready for Lumen and Nanite. And Lumen and Nanite wasn't activated in the previous project since we updated it from Unreal Engine 4, so it needs to activate it now. So this is what the scene looks like when it is done compiling. Obviously, it doesn't look as good beforehand. Some things broke, but that's okay because we're just going to be grabbing individual assets. We're not using this scene as a whole. Also, if your game is lagging, one thing you could do is come up to Settings, and under Engine Scalability Settings, we can lower the quality of everything. So let's say if your game is really laggy, you could come here and select Medium, and then that will just decrease the quality of everything for you automatically. So that is really, really nice. So I'll just come back up to Settings. Let's go and let's set it at Epic, which is where it's at by default. So if I go into unlit mode, we can go around my scene a lot better, and we notice that there's a massive glitch, and that is my objects disappear when I get far away from them. So this is a glitch right now with Unreal Engine 5. You might not have this issue, but if I click on this asset right here, and let's go into the details panel, I'll scroll all the way down, and I believe it's under, let me type in Let me type in LOD. Okay, there we go. So it's under rendering LOD. And we can see desired max draw distance is set to 3,750. So that is what's causing the issue where we scroll away and that static mesh disappears. So the way you would fix this on all your meshes is to go through and simply reset its value back to 0. So now if we look at that actual individual mesh, we scroll back, it's not disappearing really fast. But obviously, I'm not going to go through here and change that for every single mesh. And keep in mind that this is a glitch. If you're watching this in the future, this is probably already fixed by now. So what I'm going to do is press Control and Space. And within Creek Assets, I already created a blueprint that will do everything for you. So if we just double click this blueprint, and keep in mind, you don't need to know what is happening right here because this is just a temporary fix for a glitch. But when I drag my blueprint into my world, it will go over all the static meshes, and then it will set its max draw distance back to 0, which is its default value. So that will fix everything, and it will prevent me from having to go through each and every static mesh, go into Details panel, and then manually have to click Reset right there. I'm going to drag out Fix Desired Draw Distance right into my world, let go. And now I'm going to delete it because I don't need it anymore. If I scroll back, we can see that my static meshes are fixed. So I'm press Control and S to save this map. Also, in case you don't know how to change your view modes, you just want to come up here and change them there. Or you could press Alt 432 as a little shortcut. I think I'm going to go ahead and let's create our world completely from scratch. So let's make a new level. I'm going to come into Creek Assets and let's create, right click, new folder, and I'm going to call this Maps. And within Maps, if I go into it, let's right click and let's create a new level and let's call this Creek. And I'm going to double click on this. Let's save selected. And now here we are within our completely blank level. We know it's completely blank because if we look at our world outliner, there are no objects in here currently. So from this level, we're going to create our environment completely from scratch. So the first thing we need is, of course, a landscape. So I'm going to come up here and click on landscaping mode. And then within manage and new, let's create a new landscape. I think I will make sections per component instead of 1 by 1. Let's make it 2 by 2. That's how we have some more resolution to sculpt with. And then I'm going to press create. Just like that. So that will create our landscape. But of course we can't see our landscape because we need a sun. So going to create lights. Let's drag in a directional light. And let's also go to create visual effects. And let's drag in a sky and atmosphere to give ourselves a nice sky. But we have the issue, and that is our light isn't hooked up to the sky. So click on our light. I'm going to come into details. And let's set our light to movable since I want this to be fully dynamic scene. And if we scroll all the way down, we should see the atmosphere sunlight. I'm going to check this on. That's how our sun is coming through the sky. Just like that. Now we have that nasty black void right there. And we can get rid of that black void by dragging in, if we go to create visual effects, and exponential height fog. So just drag this in just like this. And we'll have one issue, and that is if I hold Control and L at the same time, I can move my sun down. And my exponential height fog is still emissive. And this is why we went into project settings. And we changed the fog right there and we turned it on. Because if I click on my height fog right now and I'll press on the details panel, I'm going to change fog in scattering color all the way to black. And then I'm going to scroll down and let's also change directional in scattering color all the way to black too. So if I press OK, and now if I hold on Control and L to move my sun down, we can see that our scene goes completely black. And that's exactly what I want. This is why we enable that setting within the project settings. And another thing I will do is let's add in a character for scale. So we're going to go into our content drawer and third person. Let's go into character, mesh, and I'm going to drag in sk_mannequin right there, just like this. And we need some light from the sky that should be projected onto our scene. So I'm going to go to create, lights, drag in a skylight, and I'm going to set the skylight to movable, just like that, and make sure real-time capture is turned on. So there we go. Now, if I press Control and L, we can move our sun around. And I'd say that is about it. We are done with lighting this scene. Now we're going to have to go into set dressing. Because lighting scenes in the outdoor are very easy. Pretty much all you need is fog, a sky, and a light and a skylight, and that's it. Because 90% of outdoor scenes are pretty much just lit by two things, and that is your sky and your sun. So now what we're going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and let's place a landscape material onto my landscape. So I've already made a landscape material for you. If you press Control and space, you should come to Creek Assets, and then Materials, and it's this one right here, mi_auto landscape _creek. So we're going to go into the details panel. For some reason, Unreal isn't letting me have these two windows open at the same time, so I'm going to go right click. Let's restore this tab real quickly, and then press Control and space, and let's drag our landscape creek onto it just like this. So keep in mind, if we open up this auto landscape, this is the same exact auto landscape that you could download right now from my Gumroad, and I also have a bunch of videos that go over what each of these features do. So I can't go over this entire landscape because then that will add 2 hours onto our tutorial, and we're already pushing it as is. If you really want to, I have an entire landscape series that you can check out that will go over all the basic features of what this landscape material is doing. But for our purposes and for this beginner tutorial series, if I open up the instance of that landscape material, we can see that I've already set up some variables that you can always come back in and play with them if you don't like them, but I think all of these settings are good enough. What we need to do is that we need to come through and we need to populate these with some textures from our medieval environment that I like. So those textures are specifically located within megascans and then surfaces. So we can see if I open up these surfaces, we can see each of the textures of them. So I'm going to drag in some of these right here into my material instance, and we will start with a_material, and I believe that this is a cliff texture. So we could go through each one and let's say double click on mossy creek stones and then drag it in that way, or I could come outside of surfaces and then go to filters and select texture just like that. So what's happening now is that it's filtering through all the different folders of surfaces, it's grabbing textures and it's showing me it like that. So instead of having to go through each of these folders, I could just see all the textures like this. And this is especially helpful. Let's say if I'm set decorating my environment, I go into 3D assets, and instead of having to click through each one like this and go through all the folders, I could come up here to filters and select static mesh just like that. And that will show me all the static meshes that are from Megascan. So this is amazing, and I always use filters all the time. And if you want to get rid of a filter, you could just press the middle mouse button and that will get rid of it. So you could turn it on like this and off like that. So let me go back down into my surfaces, and within here we're going to activate texture, and for the top one we're going to add in creek stone just like this, so normal roughness. And next up we're going to use T_forest ground, so this one for my B material. And then for my C material, let me use heavy mud right here. For the D material, we're going to have another variation of our grass layer just to give ourselves more options. And I don't know where this one is located, because if you type in T_grass, let me go into content. Okay, so T_grass layer is located in the landscape section. So I'm going to drag this one right here. It wasn't located within the Megascans folders. And this one right here. And right there, just like that. So I'm dragging the normals onto normals, the roughness on roughness, and color onto color. Pretty self-explanatory if you've been following along within this tutorial. And then we're going to go to the E material. So it's this one right here, and it's located in materials landscape. So I'm going to drag T_dry soil into color E, and dry soil normal into normal, and roughness into roughness. So essentially what we just did is that I went through all the different assets we had, and I populated my landscape material with some textures. And if you notice, I've already pre-planned these textures to be used, and I have some nice settings that I like already set up for all these textures. You can always change these settings yourself if you don't like them. So we will press save. Let's go out, And now within the creek, we'll notice that our entire landscape is completely black. And that's because we need to come up into landscape mode and paint. And now we need to give our entire scene a landscape layer. So I'm going to give it the first one, which is our material blend layer, and go weight blended layer normal and press save just like this. So this landscape material is a little bit special because if we click on it right there, and actually if I go into sculpt with sculpt selected, if I start sculpting, we will notice that we get some auto material going. So on the really sharp edges of our landscape, we get some cliffs, and on the non-sharp edges, we get, of course, our grass. And I think now is a nice time to add in a post-process volume just to lock our exposure values. So we'll go back into place actors mode. We'll go create, and let's add in a post-process volume within visual effects, post-process volume, drag it in right there. I want to make sure infinite extent bound is checked. That's what's affecting my entire world. And for exposure, let's change this to manual. And I'm going to give this 10.5. Just like that. So actually, let's try 10.6. Okay, maybe this is a little bit better. And while we're at it, let's add in some clouds. So I'm going to come to create, and let's go to visual effects, volumetric cloud, and I'll just drag it in just like this. And in case you don't know, Unreal Engine comes with clouds right out of the box. And if I increase my camera speed right here from 4 all the way to 8, if we come up to these clouds, we will see that, yes, they are actual objects. They aren't just a painting in the sky. This isn't a skybox. This sky is real. So gone are the days of skyboxes and HDRI. Now everything you see in an Unreal Engine scene is an actual object in the distance. So let's start to actually create our scene now, and we're going to start off our scene. So the really big details, and then over time we will go from big details to medium details to small details. Because first, of course, we want to block out our scene before we start diving into the really detailed areas of it. And to do so, let's bring in some of the bigger mesh, and that's specifically some of the mountains that will be off in the distance right here. So I'm going to press Control and Space, and let's go into 3D assets. And I'm going to go ahead and let's make static mesh filter turned on. So under Megascans 3D assets, we can see all the different 3D assets we can use. I specifically want to use one called, let's go Volcano, Icelandic Volcano Terrain. And I'm just going to drag it in just like this. And this is one of my favorite static meshes for adding in some really large details in the background of any scene. So I'm going to turn off my grid snapping, angle snapping, and scale snapping. And I'm also going to go ahead and let's open up this materials instance. And I think for albedo intensity, I'll bring this down from 2 to 1. That's how it's not as bright as it is. And I'm just going to scale this up. That's how it's looking good in the background. And I think now is a good time to establish our main camera shot. So I want my main camera shot to be, let's try right here. So right here will be my main camera shot. So you can imagine that the forest path is coming down into here. And somewhere over here, we start to see our houses and the creek and the water. So I'm press Control and 1 to bookmark this location. So now if I'm going to go bring back my camera speed back to 4 because I was going way too fast. So if I fly away, if I press 1, I snap to this location. So I could also come over here and I could do Control and 2. So now I could go 1 and 2. So 1, 2, and using the controls is a really good way to bookmark certain locations. You also don't have to use a shortcut. You could come up to here. And I believe that if you come to bookmarks, you can edit your bookmarks right here. But I tend to always use the shortcuts for this. So let's move this guy right here. Let's make it a little bit farther in the background. And let's move it like this. Then we can copy this mountain, move it around. So we get kind of like a little mountain range going on. I want this mountain to be the tallest. And just like this, we're making a little mountain range around ourselves. That's what the creek is, almost like it's inside some sort of valley. Okay, maybe that's a little bit too close right now. And before I mess with this a little bit more, let's go work on our landscape. So let's go into landscape mode with Shift and 2. And with the sculpt brush activated, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to increase it with my right bracket key and just start to paint around just like this. Just to give some weight to my world. And I think right here, let me make a little hill area. I'm gonna press Shift because I made that part too big. And of course you could come in here with the smooth brush and smooth everything else out after the fact. I think I'm gonna smooth out this area right there. And that's because I want to build a little creek area. So I want a river to come down from here, from this direction, and slowly come into here. And that river will eventually fade off into a little pond. So I'll go back into my landscape mode and let me decrease this brush and let me make a rush outline for that river. It's actually more of a creek, so it's not really a river. But if I hold down Shift, we can start to dig into the terrain. And I have to change back to sculpt. I was on smooth right there. So that's why I wasn't seeing any difference. I think I'm going to go ahead and let's increase this brush. And hold down Shift, let's start to dig into our world just like this. And then right here, I'm going to increase my brush so we can really just bring down this location and create a little path for our water. And while we're at it, let's actually add in our water plane. So I'm press Control and Space. Let's go into Creek Assets. And under Materials, I'm going to go and uncheck Static Mesh. And uncheck this Search. And now we're going to get everything that's within Materials. We see that we have m_water creek. This is the material I want. We need to add this to a flat plane. And of course, we can create a plane by coming up to Create, Shapes, and dragging in the plane right there. So I'm just going to drag in that plane and let's lift it out of the ground. I'm going to go ahead and let's increase that scale. Let's go Control Space again. And then let's add m_water creek onto it just like this. And we'll wait a bit for the shaders to compile. And you notice that there is a glitch. There are some glitches with landscape right now. Landscape isn't completely ready yet for Unreal Engine 5. So you'll notice right here, we have some issues with the shadow. So I found that the way to get rid of these shadow issues is you want to go all the way back and then you want to come back like that. So you want to go away from the shadows and then come back to the shadows and those weird shadows will go away. And you notice that right now we have a nice water plane and it is ready to go to simulate our water. Keep in mind, we're not going to be using the actual water simulation Unreal Engine has. We're just using a little plane that I put together. That is a good simulation of water. So just like this. And the reason why we're using this and not the actual water features is because the actual water features are still in really, really early access. And I think this tutorial is already getting pretty long. We will have another tutorial in the future that will go over landmass and all the nice water features. Okay, so now we have some nice water into my scene. We see that this is what I meant by a little creek, a little river that's going to come in and slowly come out into a massive pond that's right here. It's important to know that if you cannot select your water, and let's say if you keep trying to select your water, but you can't select it, that's because you don't have transparent selection turned on right now. And you could turn on transparent selection, I believe in settings, and right there. So you want to click allow translucent selection, or you can also press T. So now you're able to click on that water right there. So let me go ahead and I want to decrease the size of this. I want to decrease the size of this river because I feel like this is too big. I want to make it kind of small, like right here. Because I don't want it where if someone tries to cross it, they drown. I want it where if, let's say, this person tries to cross it, then they could easily cross it by just walking over it by themselves. So we're just going to increase the size and not make it so deep. I think I'm going to move my main camera angle from there to here. So just come right here and let's press Control and 1. And now if I press 1, I snap my camera right here. So I feel like this is the good spot for it. And of course, let's smooth this because that's way too harsh right there. Especially right here. Let's press smooth. Smooth this area. Okay, so I think I'm starting to like the form of this. And as you can probably guess, if we look at our water, what's wrong? We have grass underwater. That's not very realistic. So let's add in the mud layer. So I'm going to come up to, I'm going to click on my landscape. Let's go into landscape mode, and within paint, I'll scroll down and let's add material C. So I'll click on add, and let's create weight blended layer normal, and we'll just save it at the default spot. So I'll press save, just like that. And before I forget, gotta make sure we want to save everything. That's so we don't lose our progress. That'd be terrible. So let's come back into our dirt. And now with my dirt selected and with my tool strength all the way up to 1, I'm gonna start painting in that dirt. So that little mud. And I'm gonna come back into sculpt and let's smooth out this location right here. So smaller brush. We are gonna smooth it out. And of course, if you don't like how much this texture is tiling right now, you could open up your landscape material instance by selecting on the landscape and going down into the details panel and selecting it right there. And then within the material instance, we can come down to our C underscore material. And then with tiling near, we could change this from 0.5 to 0.25. And that will just increase the size of that mud and not make it that dense. So I think I'm going to keep it at, let's try 0.4. I think I'm going to keep it at there for now. And then press save. So let's try to make sure we finish the landscape before moving on to foliage. So I'm going to go ahead and let's move to sidebar, just like that. So we can see more. And I think right here it is a really good look. So let me grab this right there and I'm going to go increase its size, scale it just a bit like this, scale it up. Right here, let's scale this one up. Also increase this, just like that. And right here, let's rotate it. That's how it's not so perfect. Okay, so that's looking good. Maybe this looks a bit unnatural, so let's go back into our landscape. Let's go to smooth, and let me just smooth out this area. That's how it makes more sense why it would be coming out. And it wouldn't be so perfect like beforehand. Like right there, so that's better. And I'm actually going to head and let's increase this because this is a little bit too deep. And I don't like how this cliff is just quickly transitioning from cliff to water. I think there should be more of a fall off right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the flatten tool and then I'm going to flatten out this area right here. That's how there's a little bank before it hits the water. So just use the flatten tool, and that's way too intense. So let's bring down the tool strength to 0.2 and then use the flatten tool just like this. And now I'm gonna press on the smooth brush and let's smooth this area right here just like this. There you go. That's how it wasn't as harsh as transition as beforehand. Also right here, I do want a little hill that our houses are going to be on top of. So just increase the size. And one thing we could do if you really want to is we can go Control B. Let's find out where the static mesh is within my content drawer. Right click, we come up to Nanite and click on enabled. Wait a bit for everything to build. And it did not work. So I found out what the issue is. If I press Control and B to jump to that static mesh location within my content drawer, we will see that we have a material instance. So I will double click on this material instance and I decided to open up the actual master material of this material instance. So I just clicked on this. Keep in mind, don't worry, we don't need to know what's happening right here. But I came down here and I noticed that there's a dither blend. And we're not going to be using dither blending within this tutorial. So I just held down Alt and I broke the connection right there because we don't need to use it. And then I press apply. And it looked like that was the issue. And we got back our nanite static meshes. And if I come to lit, nanite visualization, triangles, we can see that everything is working as expected. So let's bring it back into lit. Now it's time, I think we should add in the medium details, and that is some trees and the actual houses. And before we do that, I noticed that there is some green right there. That's some leftover artifacts from the slope blending, and I want this to just be completely like a cliff. So I don't want it to have any of this green right here. So what I will do is let's go back into our landscape painting, and let's create a material layer for material A. And weight blend layer normal. Set everything to default. Let's save this. And now with my material selected right there, I'm just going to decrease my brush size and paint over it. That's how this is completely a cliff. We don't have any of that greenish leftovers from the grass. Just like that. And then let's go Shift F1. Let's go Control Space. And let's find out where our foliage is. So one thing I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to dock in layout. That's how I have my content browser always below me. I'm going to right click and let's go to collapse to tab well. So to find where my trees are located, I could come all the way down here and it's going to be in the folder called third party pn_interactive spruce forest. And then we're going to go into meshes. So we're going to start off with the really big trees and slowly escalate our way down until we get smaller trees, until we're handling the foliage, which is the grass, the flowers, the ferns. So we're starting with the big details and ending with the small details. So let's go to full and then high. And let's drag in these three trees we see right here just to see what they look like. And immediately we'll notice that these trees are really glitchy. They aren't working well with UE5. So if you're watching in the future right now, maybe this bug has been fixed. But if your trees are glitching out, flashing in between their actual color and its blackness, then I just have a really quick fix that we're going to go over. So first we need to navigate to the material that is handling our trees. So let's go into pn_interactive spruce forest, and it's going to be under materials, master materials, and it's going to be ma_summer. So we want to open this up. Now what we want to do is if we want to come all the way back up here into Creek Assets Blueprints, we can see that I have this little asset right here called fix WPO_wind. So I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to highlight all of this and Control C. And I'm going to come right here and Control V it right here. So I found that the problem that the trees have right now is that within its material, it's something to do with the way that the wind is moving back and forth. So it has something to do with the wind animation, and this wind animation is being handled right here. So we're going to replace this really complicated wind animation with the really simple one right here. And I'm going to drag out, let's see, from simple grass wind into my world position offset. And I'm going to click on enable grass wind because right now it's disabled by default to true. And you want to make sure that you drag this into world position offset. So now we get a lot simpler wind animation. And if I press apply and go back into my creek, we can see that our trees have been fixed. So that's a really quick and dirty fix to get my trees working. Keep in mind that if you're watching this in the future, you might not have to do this. But if you do have this issue, that is how you fix it. Again, UE5 is in early access. We can expect some glitches. So now that we have our trees fixed, let's actually start to populate our world and paint in our forest. So with this tree selected, I'm going to press Control and B to jump back to where this tree is located with my content browser, and then press Shift and 3 to jump into my foliage mode. So we need to drop some foliage in, and we can see that we do have the static meshes that are blue, but we also have this green thing right here, and if we hover over it, we can see this is actually a static mesh foliage. So there is no difference between this and this, except if we double click on this, it already has some foliage parameters set up for us. So we don't have to play with the settings right there. So the settings are already set up for us. If I hold down Shift and let's select both of these, let's drag it into foliage and let's go out into meshes, and let's also go to half and high And let's select these four right here. Let's also drag that into my mesh. And then let's go out to meshes. And we're not going to be placing our small little ferns in yet. And that's because I want to start off with the big trees, and then we will handle the small trees later. So by holding shift, we can go and select all of these. And on the top left-hand corner, I can activate them all. That's how we're able to paint them. And now if I left click, we can see that we paint in a little forest. Also, I noticed that one of the trees, if I go into meshes, full, high, one of these isn't being used. So I believe that the tree that's not being used right now is this one right here. So I'll just drag that in like that. And let's see what the density is set for this. So the density is right here set to 0.2. So I'll just Control C this. And let's go select this one. And let's change this from 100 to 0.2. That's how it's the same density. So keep in mind that we had to change the density right there because this mesh that we just dragged in didn't have a foliage asset. So you can save this as a foliage asset by coming up to the right hand corner and clicking on the Save Foliage Asset button. And then you can select the location and save it. We could just save it at this location right here and press save. And then we can see that we do have that foliage asset. I'm going to select everything again, make sure that they're all activated. And now let's start to paint in a forest. So to start off, I'm going to paint my forest next to the playable area or the area where the camera is, because we want it to be the most dense there, since that is what the player is going to be seeing. Now, I do want to clear out an area that will basically come from this way for my little forest road. So slowly going to go into here. I'm going to hold down shift and let's get rid of those trees. And I'm going to hold down Control and L to rotate my sun this way, just like this. Okay, so this is starting to come along nicely. I think what I'm going to do now is let's decrease this paint density from 0.5 to 0.1. And then I'm going to increase the brush size. And start to paint trees just like this. All around the place. And you can even paint some on the mountains on the back right here. So it's important to point out right now that we do have a glitch, and that is if we come really far away, our trees disappear. So our trees are disappearing. They're being culled from the environment way too fast. And that's because we're having the same issue as beforehand with the static meshes in the medieval environment, in that when we transition from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5, some things didn't carry it over. So we need to specify, if I go back into my foliage editing mode, if I click on a foliage, if we come all the way down here, we need to change this cull distance from 3000 to 0 and 0, which is its default value. So I'm going to select all the other trees, and within cull distance right here, let's click on this arrow, and we're just going to reset it back to 0, just like that. And now if I move away, my trees don't just immediately disappear. So there are some small things we can do right now to improve this scene. What I'm going to do is press on the skylight, and I want my shadows to not be that dark, because I feel like, especially if I look in here, that is very dark, very spooky. So I'm going to come into details, and within intensity scale with my skylight selected right there, I'm going to increase this from 1 to 3. Okay, let's go 2, 3. And then we will immediately see that this water right here immediately increases. And this looks completely fake. So one thing we could do to fix this water right now is to use a planar reflection. There's just one issue, and that is if I go to Create, Visual Effects, and if I drag in a planar reflection, it will say right here that planar reflection global clip needs to be enabled within the project settings to work properly. So essentially what planar reflection will do is that it will reflect a perfect mirror. So this is great for mirrors, and it's also great for water. So what I will do is come into settings, project settings, and I'm going to look up planar and click yes right there. And then we're going to restart now and save selected. So keep in mind, it will take a while for your shaders to recompile, but when you're done, this is what you should see. So you might be wondering, what is this plane right here? Well, this plane right here is our plane of reflection, and right now it's in preview mode. So if we press G, we can actually see what this reflection is doing, and we can see the cutoff right there. So this is with plane of reflection, and this is without. Obviously, plane of reflection makes a pretty big deal. So what I'm going to do is, if I press G again, if you don't like this preview plane, you can come into details with your plane of reflection selected. And within details, you can uncheck show preview plane. So that will just get rid of it. And now we can kind of like adjust the reflection like this. And I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scale this up. That's how it encompasses the majority of my water. And we're just going to fix that water just like this. So now if I come down here, we can see that our water isn't looking terrible. It looked way too bright beforehand, but now it's looking a lot better. But we just have one issue, and that is if you press Control, Shift, and H, we can see that right now we're hovering around 55 frames per second. If I hide my plane of reflection with H, we can see that we jumped to 82 frames per second. So if I press Control and H to bring back my plane of reflection, then our frames drop. So you will see a slight performance decrease when you're using plane reflections, but I think in this case it's kind of necessary. I think my shadows are a little bit too bright right now, so I'm going to click on my skylight again and go into details. Let's change this from 3 to 2, and I'm going to press Control Shift H at the same time to hide that FPS counter on the top right there, because we don't need that anymore. So unfortunately for us right now, Lumen isn't really making that much of an improvement. And if I press Control Shift H to bring up my frames again, because I think that's important, right now it's at like 45 frames. If I turn this off to none, and if we go back, we can see that that just boosted about 15 frames. So the reason why Lumens isn't really making a big effect right now, and that's because landscapes, as of the time of recording this video, do not work with lumens. So landscapes will not give off ray trace global illumination. Now it does give off screen space global illumination. So what I want to do is I want to come into details and make sure post-process volume is enabled or is selected. And then we're going to come into global illumination method and change this from lumens, which is what it was at beforehand, to screen space global illumination. So I found screen space, at least for this scene, gives the best quality global illumination. And in case you're wondering what screen space global illumination is, to demonstrate what screen space global illumination is, I'm just going to come right here, and within World Outliner, let's make sure we have post-process selected. And if I scroll down here, okay, we do have screen space turned on right now. So I'm going to come up here and let's create a little sphere. So I'm going to drag out a sphere, and then I'm going to increase its size. Just like this. So now we can see that at this point right here that we do have a little bit of green reflection. So let's go into lit and lighting only, or detail lighting. That's what we can see what happened. So right now we are getting some screen space global illumination, in that what it does is that it takes only the pixels that you can see in your frame, and it takes those pixels and then it projects it onto an object. But as soon as we raise our camera away from those pixels, it no longer has any pixels to project on that object. And as you can see right now, since we're not looking at the ground that's directly below this sphere, we're not getting any global illumination. But as soon as we look at that ground again, we get that global illumination. So if we go back into our post process, we can see that Lumen is using a little bit of that global illumination method we just talked about. So if I change it to Lumen, we are still getting that bounce lighting, but that bounce lighting isn't from ray tracing, it's from screen space. So if we're only getting screen space global illumination to begin with, we might well just pick screen space global illumination right there. Just like that. Just to save on frames, and plus Lumen doesn't work well right now with foliage, and there's going to be a lot of foliage in our scene. So that's just an unfortunate side effect of using really new tech. Keep in mind that this tutorial will be remade when Unreal Engine 5 is officially released, and hopefully by then some of the kinks of these features can be worked out. So I'm going to select my mesh, and I'm just going to delete it right there. Now, my scene is looking really drab. It's not that colorful, and I want to increase the color of this scene. So let me select my directional light. I believe it's right here. And then within details, if I scroll up, let's make this a little warmer than it actually is right now. So let's make this 5,700. There we go. That's just going to make my scene a little warmer. And then if I look at my sun, so my sun's right there, I want some light shafts. So I could give myself some light shafts by coming to details. And then let's scroll down here to the light shafts and let's select both of these on. Okay, so now we're getting some nice light shafts. And I think I also want to go into here and let's kind of tint this. Okay, so let's tint it orangey like that. Okay, there we go. So our scene is slowly starting to come together. This looks really nice. And then I think my fog is way too intense over there. I'm going to go select my fog if it is right here. And let's scroll up. And I'm going to make this one 0.03. Okay, that made it a little bit more intense. Let's try... Actually, I'm going to leave it at 0.03. And within the start distance, I'm going to increase the start distance at 5,000. Okay, so that was what was causing it. So this was before, and this is after. So as soon as I increase that start distance, where our fog won't start until we're about 5,000 centimeters away from the camera, then our scene is starting to look a lot brighter, a lot more vibrant. And of course, we can go into World Outliner, and I'll just manually increase the brightness, and then we'll go into details. Within color grading, let's change the global. So I'll just drop down right here. I'll check saturation and contrast. And then I'll bring up my saturation to, let's try 1.075. Okay, maybe that's a little bit too intense. So let's go 1.02. 1.03. Okay, I'm going to keep it at 3. And then for my contrast, I'm going to increase this to 1.05. So just increase, actually 1.02. So just bring my contrast up just a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to come back into foliage mode. And I want to hide some of the trees right there. So I want to add some more trees onto the slope since I feel like it's missing some. So I'll just come back here. Let's select all my trees. And let's make the paint density 0.25. And then we'll just paint in some more trees right there. Also, I want some more trees at the very edge. So I'm going to decrease this. And try painting some more trees right like that. Okay, this is great. So we can see that slowly and surely our scene is starting to come together. It's starting to look really nice at this moment. And there's just one issue, and that is we have a fall feel to it. It feels like autumn because some of these trees are not green. They're orangey or they're brownish, or even over there, they're brownish, yellowish. And personally, this is my personal opinion, I don't like this color. So we could change the color on these trees if I press Control and Space. Let's go back to where our trees are located. And don't forget, you always have to save. That's how we don't lose our progress. And let's go into PN_interactive spruce forest under third party. And then if we go to materials and then master materials, actually first, we're going to go into meshes and let's just open up one tree's material. So I'll open up this tree and let's go open up this leaf right here. So whenever we're in a static mesh editor, you can see what materials affect what part of the mesh by clicking highlight right there. So we can see that this material right here are the leaves of the tree. So I'm going to double click on this. And then we can change the leaf tint right here down there. So let's go find, and let me move it. That's so we can see what tree we're going to be affecting right now. And if I zoom all the way up right here, if we start to play with this tint, we can see that we're affecting that tree specifically right there. So I want to pick a brightish greenish color like this. Okay, so I really like this color right here. Maybe it's a little bit too saturated, a little bit too green. So I'll just bring it down like right here, just like that. So what I could do is that I could go through every single one of these trees and manually find the material that is on its leaves and then change the leaf tint right there. And, you know, we totally could do that, but that is super, super slow. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click. Let me copy this tint. I'm going to jump into this material instance. And then I'll jump into its master material. And now within here, I can scroll all the way over here. So let's see where the color is being handled. So I can press Control and F at the same time, and we'll see a search bar. And within the search bar, I'm going to type leaf tint. So let's see where that parameter is. It's right there. So I'm going to double click on it. We'll jump to where that's located. And we can see it's located right here. I think what I'll do is that I'm going to hold down 3 and left click. So 3 and left click to bring in our constant 3 vector. Again, you can also right click and just type in 3 vector right there, and you could grab it that way. And now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to right click and press paste. And now we can see that the color that we chose is right here. So I'm going to go and replace this leaf tint with this one right here like this. So now this is going to be affecting all of its material instances. And this material right here is the master material for our entire forest. So when I press apply, all our trees should be a nice greenish color that we picked right there. So I'm going to press apply like this. Now that we can see that our scene is looking a lot better, it's looking a lot more bright, a lot more colorful, and this is exactly what I want. So before we move on, this is something I like to do within all my projects that I'm only using dynamic lighting within, is I like to go into the world settings. And within world settings, under light mask within the drop down, I like to select force no pre-computed lighting. And press OK. That's how if I accidentally press build up here, then it won't build my level. So if I press build all level, you'll see that nothing happens. Now I believe it is finally time to start populating this world with static meshes and start handling that medium-sized detail. So first thing we're going to do is let's establish the road back here. Because right now it's just a grassy area and I want it to be a little road path. That's how we actually have a location that people can come from when they're trying to get to the homestead. So to do that, let's first build a bridge. And if I press Control and space in content under meshes, and then if we go to houses right here, click on the filters. I'm going to give myself the static mesh filter again. We can see we get a bunch of modular assets, and the specific modular asset I want to use is SM_boarded window. So I'm going to drag this out like this, and this little static mesh right here will be used as my bridge that will be going across the moat. So I'll just bring it up like this, and I'm going to deactivate snapping up here. And now let's build our little bridge. So make this a little bit bigger, like this. And I'm going to come up here and make sure local rotation is turned on. That's so I can actually rotate it along its axis. Just like this. And then we can hold down Alt. We'll drag out that static mesh. And if you notice, I'm kind of scaling it like this, just to give it some variety. So what I'm doing when you scale like that is that you're basically mirroring the object. That's how they don't look so perfect. And right there, I notice that there's an issue and that those do look perfect. So I'll just change it back like that. And I think this creek might be a little bit too big right now. So I'll grab these 4 right here and let me try to move them down just like this. And I'm going to go into my landscape mode. And with the sculpt brush, I'm going to drastically decrease the size because that's way too big. And I'm going to try to blend the landscape better with my bridge. And now it's time to finally add in our little path, our road. So I'm going to come into paint, and I believe our road is material E. It's the last one. So we're going to have to create a layer for this and save it defaults. Now I'm going to select this, and I'm just going to start painting in that path. So the path will lead into a little homestead area. It will go across the bridge. And it will be emerging from the forest. So it's like a path and it's coming from a dense forest. And finally it ends up in the homestead. And keep in mind, whenever we're painting layers, you can always hold down Shift to get rid of that layer. just like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go scatter these trees around because I feel like these trees are a little bit too close to each other. So I'm just going to go into foliage mode and I'm going to use the select tool. So I'll just be able to select different trees and simply just move them around like normal. Let's come back into paint and I only want to select the thick trees right here because I'm going to use this to basically paint a little tree wall right there. So that's how when we look down this path, we don't just see a little grass field. I want it to feel like that we're in a dense forest. So all the way out here where these trees selected, I'm going to bring this down from paint density 0.5. Let's make this 0.2. And I'm just going to paint some stuff right here to just block that exit. And then another thing I'm going to do is let's go and copy this mountain right there. All the way right here. That's how there's just some visual elements to look at back there. Okay, there we go. I'm pressing Control and B. Let's go into my mega scans and then 3D assets. Let's activate our static mesh filter. And I want to use the Icelandic terrain. So I'm going to scroll down and I want to use this mesh right here. So I'm going to drag it out. And then I've noticed that it seems like it's broken right now. So I'm going to come into details. And I'm going to open up this material. And let's go into its parent material. Okay, I think that's why. Because we have runtime virtual texture blending right now. We are not going to be using runtime virtual texture blending within this tutorial since this is a beginner tutorial. So we need to disable it somehow. Okay, so it looks like there isn't. So we're going to have to kind of fiddle with the nodes right now to get rid of this runtime virtual texturing. So in case you're curious what runtime virtual texturing is, I have a tutorial that's on my YouTube channel that you can check out. And we go over what a lot of the nodes you see right here are doing. But I'm going to highlight everything and I'll just click on the delete key. So this is the issue with kind of using pre-created assets and templates, is that sometimes it doesn't do exactly what you want. Now I'm going to hold down Control and I'm going to grab the top, so the top wires up here, and I'll just delete these. That's how I know which wires actually work, and delete these reroute nodes right here, just like that. So let us hold down Control and I'm going to drag this into albedo, drag my specular into specular, drag my roughness into roughness, and then let's go down here and let's drag my normal from this line right here all the way up here into normal, just like that. And now I'll press apply and hopefully this should work. Okay, and now it appears it is working. So in case you're confused with what just happened, I decided to go back here and really walk through what just happened. So beforehand, we had a bunch of nodes down here that were controlling the runtime virtual texture blending. Now we are not going over that in this tutorial, so I decided to delete those nodes and then hook up my color, roughness, and normal as if everything is happening correctly back here. So we don't need these lerps right here, so I'm going to delete them. And I will grab, and also I could delete this 0 because by default metallic is set to 0, so I don't need a constant there. And then I can simply bring my material attributes all the way back here. And I'm going to move these reroute nodes around just to make my graph look a little bit nicer. I feel like we don't need this fuzz. So I'm going to delete this and delete all of these. And then we're going to hook up saturate right there like this. And what is this? Okay, roughness. Okay, that was the fuzz. So I'll also delete these right here. And here you go. If you want to take a look and copy this material verbatim, go ahead. Essentially what we just did was that I went through and I made this material a lot more simple than it was previously. I got rid of a lot of features that we won't be using, and I just deleted them and hooked up all these nodes just like this. So feel free to go into this material, which is m_blend_master, and do the exact same thing until your material looks like this. Also, if you're still confused, do not worry. If you press Control and Space to bring up our content drawer, you will see that I just added a new asset right here within Creek Assets Blueprints. So you should also see this when you download the content, and this is Fix Remove RVT. So if you click on this, we will see that we just have what we made right here. So you can highlight this, Control C, go into specifically m_blend_master. It has to be m_blend_master. And then you can paste it in, delete everything else in your graph, and hook it up just like this into your blend master. So this one right here, we're going to your base color. This one will go into roughness, and this one will go into normal. Very simple. So if you're still confused, you can just copy and paste all the nodes into m_blend_master just like this. So again, that's the issue with using asset packs, is that a lot of times these assets aren't set up the way you want them to, so you always have to edit them. And I really like this rock mesh, and the reason why I brought in this rock mesh, and as a reminder, this rock mesh is called SM_Icelandic terrain, is because it's really big, and I love to just use it to just vary up my terrain and just break it up with some rocks. So for example, I could put my rocks down here like this, move it around, and then give my creek some rocks to them. Or one thing I do like to do is I like to add it up here, just like this. So essentially what I'm doing with these rocks is that I'm making it look like these are some geometric cliffs. I think I'm going to go ahead and let's open up this material instance right here. And I'll notice that specular is set to 1.2. I don't want that. I want to decrease the specular just a bit. So I'll bring this to 0.5. Actually, let's go 0.2. Just like that, because I noticed my rock was a little bit too shiny. And I don't want that. So now we're going to bring it back down. And I'm going to place this rock like it's a rock formation right here. And use the select tool to raise my trees. Okay, so this has been a while, but I believe we are finally done with the large details. We have a nice block out of our location. We have a little road. It is leading from a forest, and it's going to slowly come out, and then it's going to show a little homestead with a house right there and a little house up here at the top of that hill. So this is going to be pretty fun, and now it's time to actually build our house. And we're going to build our house using modular design. So what is modular design? If I press Control and Space, and this is one of the reasons why I decided to go through and use this specific asset pack, is because Quixel, Epic Games, they've already set up a nice modular pack for us to use. So if I go to meshes and come all the way to houses, we see that we have modular_assets. And then if I click on static mesh, we can see that we have a bunch of different modular parts that we can put together on our house. And if I go to Megascans and then type in modular, we can see that we also have right here a bunch of different modular assets that we're going to use to create a medieval house. So I'm just going to drag all of our little pieces out here. That's so we can all see them. And I think I'm going to dock and layout for now. So modular pieces are static meshes that are meant to be put together like Legos. So as we can see, we have a bunch of static meshes, and they're different, but they still have the same form. They have the same form in that if I put them together like this, move it up, we can see that they can all fit together. So I can swap them out, put them and arrange them in different orders, and create a bunch of different houses from a select few static meshes. So that's a power modular design. You can basically think of it as Legos, but in 3D. Also, keep in mind that I'm going to be going through my content browser and grabbing a lot of different static meshes. So up here, let's say if I go through and if I select, let's say this axe right here. So whenever I'm going through my content browser and trying to look for a static mesh, if you want to follow along exactly and see where that specific static mesh is, you can see right here we have the file path. So it goes content, megascan 3D asset axe, and then this is where that axe is. Or if you really want to get a static mesh and you know its name but you don't know where its location is, you can scroll all the way up here and click on content, and then you can just type in the name of that specific static mesh. So I could type in sm_axe, and then you can find where axe is. And just as a recap real quickly, let's say if we want to get all the static meshes within our content folder, we could click on static mesh like that. And now we're going to get the list of all the different static meshes because we are using the filter right here. So you could click up here and you could choose different filters for different assets. So if you want to get static mesh and textures, then we can also select texture like that. And you can click and uncheck to turn on and off those filters. So those are just some pro tips on how to navigate your content browser. Also, don't forget, if you select a static mesh and if you press Control and B, you will jump to that location within your asset browser. So let's build our first house using module design, using all these pieces we have out here. And just as a reminder, we have some more pieces, specifically some wood pieces. If we come up into meshes, and I'm going to uncheck static mesh real quickly because I want to go into houses. And within houses, we have roofs. And then if I check static mesh, we can see all the different roof types. So we need to build this house around a specific roof type. So let's see what roofs we have right now. I'm going to drag from here. And we have this roof. Let's see what this roof is. This one. Okay, I like this one. It's not as crazy as these two. So this roof is an option. Okay, I'm pretty sure I'm just going to stick with this roof right now. So it appears this roof is SM_house4. So I like the way this roof is structured. So let's build the house right here. And I think just for now, I'm going to go into create. And I'm going to drag out a cube. That's how we have a flat plane to build the house on. And I do not like the color of this cube. So let's come up to Creek Assets, and within material folder, I'm just going to right click. Let's create a new material. I'm just going to call this gray. And within gray, of course, I'm going to hold down 3, left click, and let's make a gray texture. Let's go 0.45. Put that into base color. And then within roughness, I'm going to hold down 1 and make this completely rough, just like this. And press apply. And save. So I'm just going to drag gray onto it like that. And now actually we'll make this more gray. So let's bring it down like this. And press OK. And then apply. Because I would rather build this house on top of a flat plane than our really bumpy terrain that we have. Okay, so first off, let's start with the door. We have a couple of door options, and I think I will use this door. And let's add a back that is basically like a barn door. So this one right here. So we'll use these two. And I will move them up. Right here like that. I'll press the N key to snap these to the floor. That's how they're flush with the floor. And let's have this door be in the middle exactly. And I'm going to move this one to the back. Actually, we can make this one to the side. I just checked on angle snapping right there. That's how we can snap it to 90 degrees, just like this. And move it forward right there like that. And of course, we need something to fill this with. So I think I will select this one right here. I'm going to hold down Alt. drag it like this. Let's rotate this 90 degrees. And I'm going to move it up and try to scale it. That's how it's at the correct proportions of this roof we are using. There we go. And keep in mind, it doesn't have to be super perfect right now. Of course, we're going to come in and we're going to fill in a lot of the holes with wood and some other assets. Then let's use some windows. So let's use these two right here. And we can always flip a mesh. So I want this side right here to be on that side. So I'm going to press R and let's go scale it in the opposite direction, just like this. And we're going to move it back here like that. Now I'm going to grab this. And we're going to move it right here like this. And put it just there. And keep in mind, I'm being very rough. I'm not being very specific about matching up these vertices exactly, because I feel like, especially for medieval, you don't need to line up the vertices exactly. If it looks right, it just looks right. Now, there are ways to vertex snap. I'm aware of that, but we're not going to be going over that within this tutorial because I feel like that's not necessary. And the vertex snapping controls are pretty crazy. So I'm going to hold on Alt. Let's drag this one right here. And let's use this to fill the corner piece. And then I'm going to have to scale this in place. So I'm going to have to scale this a little bit back. Scale this a little bit forward. There we go. Now at the back here, let's use these two meshes. So I sped up the rest of the process here because what I'm doing is that I'm literally just moving meshes around. I'm moving, rotating, and scaling them around. And you'll notice that for pretty much the rest of this tutorial now, that will be the majority of this course. Is that we're just placing objects and removing objects. Because we've already gone through the really hard, heavy lifting, the technical stuff of this environment. Now you can pretty much sit back, play some music, and just enjoy building your environment. So I highly encourage you to not follow me verbatim for the rest of this course and to stray off a bit, to create your own house, to use your own designs and play with the modular features. And if you don't like something, then you can always just go back and delete it. So this is really important. Don't forget to save your world now because that was a lot of work. So here, you know, this house it's okay, but it's looking kind of boring. So we could come into, don't forget we have even more modular designs that we can play with. If we go into, scroll below Megascans into meshes and then houses. If I click on static mesh, we can see all these other modular designs. So for example, we get SM_boarded windows. That, fun fact, we already used right here to make this bridge, but that was just temporary. So I'm gonna go stick it right here, just like this. And then you're able to move it out like that. So we could go through and we could even, we could even bring this out. And you can maybe kind of like overlay it onto the roof like that. So that's pretty much what I'm going to be doing right now. I'm just going to go through and add some wood, vary everything up, hide some of that nasty holes within my house, and definitely add some wood frames right here to cover up these seams. So as you probably saw from the time lapse, you saw a lot of backtracking. You saw me take a lot of meshes and basically just move them around and see which location looked best for them. So that's part of the fun, is just you want to experiment, see what you can do, see what you can come up with. And now I think that our house is pretty much done for now. Of course, we can always go back and change things, but let's take our house and let's move it right here. So I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna delete all of our meshes right here. And now I'm gonna grab my house and I'm specifically gonna move it. If I press 1, we can snap back here. I'm gonna move it right here. So that's how it's facing that direction. Also, you can always press Ctrl and L to play with the lights. I could go through and hold down Shift and select everything. And once I select everything, I can bring it back here and then deselect. But then there's just one issue, is that what if I want to move this house again? Then I'm going to have to select all the meshes all over again. So that's where groups come in. So first we have to select all the meshes I want to group together. Now I could come through and select everything individually, holding down Shift, but that's just a hassle. Or I could come up to perspective. Let's go to top. And now I could go highlight all my meshes right here, just like this. And I want to hold down Control, and I want to make sure I deselect my landscape, this plane, and this reflection capture right here. So hold down Control. Let's make sure we deselect everything. That's how now if I go back into perspective, we can see that if I click on global, because beforehand it's going on this axis, I want it to go on the global axis. We have everything selected, which is nice. So now I'm going to right click, go down here, press on groups, or I can press Control and G. And now if I deselect, and let me delete this box. So now I can move my entire house around, no problem, as if it is one static mesh. So I'm gonna go rotate this like this, and I think I'm gonna place my house right here. Just like that. And let's see what it looks like from the main camera view. And I believe that looks great. So once we're finally done with our group, all you have to do is right click, go down to groups, and finally ungroup. So now we can, once again, individually select individual meshes. So that is absolutely great. So one thing we need to do real quickly is that we need to go into landscape mode, and within sculpt, I want the flatten brush with tool strength of 0.5. And sometimes you're just gonna have to come through and kind of flatten the area around your house, just like this. And then I'm going to go Shift 3, and I want another house specifically right here. So I'm going to use the select tool and select this tree right here. And I'm going to move some trees around just to make some room for a second house. And before we add a second house, I think I'm going to add in some foliage just to get a better sense of our world. So to do so, let's press Control and space. And we already have a bunch of foliage within Megascans under 3D_plant right here. If I click on static mesh, we can see some foliage. So I'm going to go into my foliage editor, and within my content drawer, I'm just going to dock it in my layout for now. That's so I can easily drag in my foliage right here. I'm going to select all my trees and unselect them. That's how we're no longer painting in trees. And then we're going to drag in some foliage. So I like all these ferns. I'm going to drag them in just like this. And then I also like these dead grasses. The grass is right here. Basically, you can just pick and choose what you like. All of this foliage is selected like this. And make sure they are checked. That's how we can start to paint. Now I'm going to exit out the content browser. And if I paint down right now, I feel like it's going to be way too dense. And yes, that was way too dense. So I'm going to have to go through here and we're going to have to edit each of these, which is unfortunate. But what you could do, and I'm not going to do that, but what you could do is that you could go through each of these. And within density, you could decrease the density to, let's say, 10. And then within uniform scale, I would normally scale this from something like 0.8 to 1.5. And now if we're just going to be looking at this, and keep in mind I can press Control and A to select everything, and then I can deactivate everything by just clicking like that. So Control and A will select all your foliage, And let's just select this foliage right here as an example. So what I would normally do is that I would go through and then I would refine the paint tool. So I would give this a random scale by scaling right here from 0.8 to 1.5. So that'll just vary our ferns just a little bit. And then I would decrease it from a coarse 100 to something more reasonable like 10. So that's generally what I would do. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'll just keep everything as is for now. So I'll select all of them and let's activate them just like this. And now I'm going to go through the sides and just paint it right here like this. And let's also paint it right there, right here. And I do not want this over the path. So I'm going to hold down Shift and delete those like that, just like this. And then I'm going to deselect the ferns right here. So I'm going to select this one, hold on Shift, select that one, deselect it right there. And keep all my other little grass things also selected. And just go through and let's paint in some grass right here. Now I notice this is way too white right here, so I can just individually delete only the white foliage by coming in here. Let's deselect everything by pressing Ctrl and A. In the top left hand corner, I'm just going to click on the activate button to deselect everything. And then I'm only going to select the white flower ones. So this one, this one, this one, leave these two and these two. Have them be selected. And now I'm going to hold down Shift. And that should just start deleting some of them. So just a little bit of them should be deleted. Also, I think I'm going to paint in some ferns on this side also. Just like this. And we are forgetting something, and that is the small trees. So let's go down all the way to here. And let's go into PN_interactive spruce forest. Meshes, small, and these trees right here. So once again, I'm going to dock this in my layout. That's how it's easier for me to drag this into my foliage tool. And we're going to select our foliage assets, so the green ones, and drag it in just like this. So now that we have these available, let me go check all these. Actually, let's Control A and let's deselect everything. And then I'll hold down Shift and select these and place them here, just like a little bit too much right there. And keep in mind, this entire time I've had my paint density to 0.2. Obviously, if you had your paint density all the way up to 1, that would be a lot of foliage you're trying to handle. And also, foliage is pretty expensive. So if your computer can't handle it, I would limit the amount of foliage that you're going to be doing right now. So originally I planned on just making one house and making a second house, let's say right here. But by looking at it right now, I really like the way that this looks, just one simple house and with a path just leading to it just like that. So I think for this build, we're only going to be making one house right now. Also, for the rest of this tutorial, it will be time-lapse because I'm not doing anything technical. I'm not teaching anything new. All I'm doing is just grabbing and placing objects around my world and playing with the foliage tool. That is literally it. And I might decide to download some assets from Quixel Bridge if I really need to. But right now, I feel like this is good. So I'm going to go skip ahead and we will time lapse through this entire thing. And this is literally just the refinement stage. So I'll be, let's say, adding in some more meshes right here. I'll be moving the trees around and adding foliage, more rocks, maybe some pebbles along this creek right here, and some stabilization for my bridge, because right now my bridge is just floating. So that's pretty much it. And this mannequin is very menacingly just standing there. That's pretty scary. So I'll move my mannequin right here just as a human reference for us. So without further ado, let's begin. So before we move on to the time lapse, let's go over some quick optimization features. And if you notice, I press Control, Shift, and H at the same time. And doing that will just give us this FPS counter, which will give a good indicator of our current performance. So first off, I set my scene to scalability of high right now. If you remember, if we come into settings, all the way down to engine scalability settings, you can choose one. So by default, it's on epic. And I just decided to move it back to high because I was recording using OBS and OBS started to lag. I noticed it was lagging with the videos. So I decreased that quality right there. Another thing we can do to increase the quality, and this will definitely increase it, is that if I delete my planar reflection, and if you remember, we added the planar reflection to give ourselves some nice reflection for our water, but if I just delete it right now, our frames went from about 42 frames per second all the way up to 80 frames per second. And that's because what planar reflection is doing is that it's rendering your scene twice. So of course, if we delete it, then we're going to drastically increase that performance. But now our water reflection looks absolutely terrible, but we can fix this by using the traditional reflection methods. And that is if we come to create visual effects, let's add in a spear reflection capture, just like this, and move it up like that. So then I can hold down Alt and move this reflection capture all around, and that should fix it. So that's probably the biggest way that you could improve your scene, is just deleting that planar reflection. I will add it in later when I'm about to get ready for a final shot. Next up, we will notice that if we come up to our grass right here, to our foliage, especially with our ferns, that the backside, the bottom side of our ferns are really, really dark. So this is no good. So I'm gonna press Shift F3. Within here, I'm gonna go select all of my ferns, just like this. And down here, under Cast Contact Shadows, I'm gonna turn that off. So this is off, this is on. So keeping it off definitely makes my scene look a lot better. Keep in mind that foliage it hasn't really been working well with Unreal Engine 5, so some of these issues might be fixed when you start. Also now, let's select my post-process volume in the middle of my map, and then within the details panel, we come here and we can see we're currently in screen space. So our frames are about 80 frames per second. If I change this from screen space back to lumen, which is Unreal's default lighting, then we can see that we dropped to about 75 frames per second. So that was a 5-frame difference. I think that this is personally fine, and we might as well use Lumen for the rest of the video, since after all, Lumen is an Unreal Engine 5 feature, and this is an Unreal Engine 5 tutorial. And finally, if we come up to our trees right here, you remember that we fixed the wind on our trees by copying and pasting in some wind nodes. But now, if we look at our bark, this looks very scary. Our wind is affecting our bark right now, and this is no good. So we need to turn off the wind on our bark, and we can do that by, we can open up this specific tree, just like this. Let's go find where it is. Let's open up the static mesh editor, and then I can see what is the bark mesh, and it looks like the bark mesh is this one right here, and some of the branches are this one right here. So these two, element 0 and element 1. So I'm going to open up both of these, and within both other materials, I'm going to click on enable grass and wind and disable it like that. Same thing right here, enable grass and wind, disable it, and I'm going to save. And now if we look at our static mesh, we can see that our bark is no longer swaying in the wind like the leaves. So that just fixed the issue, but I'm going to have to go through over all of the different trees and do that same exact process, because as we can see right here, some of the trees still have wind on their bark. Okay, so to start off, I decided to add in some wooden poles to help elevate that bridge. That's how the bridge isn't just floating there. And I also added in some wood boards to help blend the bridge in a little better with the landscape. Then I decided to add some props around the house, some basic props, so that it looks like someone lived there. And I was also covering a hole I found out within my house. And then I realized I don't have rocks in my scene. So of course, I'm just going to go through, see what rocks are available, and start placing them around my map. And I also decided to add some pebbles to the creek right there, just to give some variety if someone decided to look into the water. And finally, I thought that my road was looking a little bit too bland, so I decided to paint on some foliage, specifically dead brush and twigs. And copy around some more. And if you notice right here, whenever I would find a mesh that had really bad LODs, then I just change that to a nanite mesh, because nanites don't have LODs. And then again, I'm still playing with the foliage right now, trying to paint And I noticed that the trees were really empty right here, so I started moving trees around just to cover that area. That's how if someone did decide to look down the creek, they wouldn't just see a grass field. And then I thought that my scene had a little bit too much shadow, so I started moving some trees around just to let in some more light. So finally, after about 5 hours, this is our finished result. This is our finished scene. And if you really want to, you can come up here to the 3 drop downs, and then you could change the field of view too. So if you don't like this field of view, you could change it up and make it look something completely different. I'll leave it at 90 for now, which is the default. And one reason why I like this composition is because at the sides here, we have some trees and bushes, and these trees and bushes basically create a natural vignette. So our eyes are naturally caught to look at the house in the middle right here, especially with the path that is leading our eyes to the house. So this is why I really like compositions like this, very simple compositions. And finally, for some finishing adjustments, I'm going to come into my world outliner. Let's select the post-process volume, and then within the details panel, let's go into exposure and let's increase this from 10.6 to 11, just to make my scene a lot brighter. And then within bloom, let's increase our bloom from 0 to, let's go 1.5. Okay, to just give our scene a very fantasy look to it. And not only is this a really nice scene to look at, if you remember, Unreal Engine is a game engine, so we can even create a game within this scene. So within world settings, I'm going to come into the drop down, and then I'm going to select third person game mode, because if you remember, we built this off of the third person game mode template. And now if I press play, we can see that I can walk around as my character, jump around and explore my environment, which is absolutely amazing. And as you see, you can just come up here. You can play with his workbench and go back into his house and take a nap. And as always, if you haven't started with this scene, I highly recommend for you to not just follow what I created right here, but to actually go through and create something entirely new. Create maybe a new house, maybe an entire village. Grab random Megascan assets and start putting them together. Just be creative and have fun, because these tools have never been available until now. We have so much power in our hands, and you see it right here. Within 5 hours, you're able to go from knowing nothing about Unreal Engine to having the skills to create something like this. And that is only possible with Unreal Engine 5. Well, I guess now this is the end of the tutorial. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you got something out of it, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, if you really want to support the channel, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter, link in the description below, for Unreal Engine 5 news weekly. And also, I plan on uploading a new video every week, so stay tuned for that. So without further ado, I'd say this is goodbye.